Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
It's that time of year again. The Rehoboth Independent Film Festival gets underway next month. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Since 1998, the festival has featured films ranging from documentaries to foreign films and independent features. In the next half hour, we'll be exploring some of those films that have made the final cut. And in the studio to help us out is Joe Balancio. He is the man who peruses the stacks and selects the films. And welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here as always.
So tell me a little bit about what kind of films are sort of overall that you've been looking at, and any changes, differences from the year before, a few years. What's going on?
Yeah, well, actually, it's always sort of the same pool of films. We end up with really, really good independent films, international films, and as you said, documentaries and shorts. We do see a lot of trends, but typically what we do is, we still provide 80 to 100 of the best films out there, and again, that go into those categories. And this year we were really excited. We actually had what I would call an upswing in really good, solid independent film, predominantly American independent. So for us, that was one of the things we tried to focus on, and a couple of the films we'll talk about today really kind of fit into that American independent category. So we're really excited about that, as well as wonderful international films. I think people always think that we're this, high art, sophisticated, hoity-toity, and that's not it at all. While there are those films, we really do try and reach out to every community as possible, and the program really is a reflection of that, and especially this year.
So you're talking about particularly independent American films. Why do you think that is?
Everybody asks me that question. I think funding, although it's getting easier. It's still not easy. That's one of the harder things to do, especially for an American independent film producer and director, to try and find money. But I think there are avenues that are opening up that make it easier. Some of the filmmaking techniques make it easier to shoot a film. Typically, an American independent always had that, Blair Witch handheld sort of really, really independent look and feel. And now the American independents are getting a little more sophisticated in the way they look and the way they feel. And again, a lot of that is advances in equipment. But I think overall, and people are just really making a commitment. They're really good stories being told really well. And the fact that they're made on a limited amount of money is really just going by the wayside. You can really see these things shine and have made really good inroads.
Yeah, by the way, do you think that the fact that we've had this technology, which has not only come down in size and the need for lots and lots of people to a much more smaller group of people that you need, and it's obviously smaller in terms of the physical equipment as well as the cost of that equipment, do you think that's contributed to an increase in the number of films that are being produced, or that are being produced well?
I do. And I think there was a time when that notion that everybody could be a filmmaker was actually bad for the industry, and that you were seeing really bad films. And I hate to say that, but truth be told, there were some films just should not have been made. And I think the fact now that people are even trying and attempting to make films, it sort of creates a bigger pool of which you're getting some really unique and creative work, because there are a lot of people who would consider themselves artists first, or maybe even professionals first, who have made a film as opposed to filmmakers, and some of those have become some of the best filmmakers. So it's that, before I couldn't try, I didn't have access. The as you said, it was just financially not in my wheelhouse, and now it is. And maybe I'll be good, maybe I'm not. And some of those are becoming really, really good. So I definitely think that it is a change in attitude, and both, and fiscally actually does definitely impact that.
Now, obviously, you took a look at a lot of films. Are there issues? A lot of films, right. Are there more issues now being covered, do you think, or explored in film as opposed to, say, a few years ago? Have the issues changed? I mean...
It's interesting, and that's actually... I sort of provide this... sort of overview of things that we get per month to the board, just so they sort of know. And it's so cyclical. So there are a lot of coming out stories one year, then you won't see those forever, and then all of a sudden you'll see them again 3 years later. this year we had a lot of independent horror, and it seems like that's been sort of a genre on the cusp for a long time. Horror movies can typically be made, as interesting as it sounds, they can typically be made a little less expensive than other genres. I guess ketchup can go a long way for blood, and but so the American horror genre is sort of one that we've seen a lot of upswing in some what I'd consider underrepresented countries, filmmaking communities in Iran and Iraq, and we had a film last year from Saudi Arabia. So I sort of try and make this conscious effort to say, wow, what is new with this crop of films? And again, I don't want to say same things, different year, because they're sort of tweak what we see, but it really is sort of some of the same things. But again, I must say that the American Independence that we saw this year, we could have done a whole film festival of American Independence. Could have been the Rehoboth Beach American Independent Film Festival. But and again, some of those that I brought here to talk about today are really sort of unique in the story that they tell and how they tell it.
Well, let's turn to one called Point and Shoot, which is a documentary. It's by Matthew Van Dyke, and it's really essentially about two things. One is he takes an initial trip through North Africa and the Middle East, motorcycle trip. I think it's 2007, 2009, but then he returns to fight with the Libyan rebels in 2011. So, first of all, what was when you first saw this film, what was your reaction to it? Because there's a certain slowness in it, the first portion of it, because you said, but then it kind of picks up.
Yeah. And real quick, it's actually, Matthew Van Dyke is the subject, and Matthew was born in Baltimore and raised here in Fenwick Island, and Marshall Curry is the director. Marshall's an award-winning documentarian who did a film, If a Tree Falls, and Racing Dreams, and really wonderful. Matthew himself is a director.
Right, and I think there's footage of him, yes.
A lot of the footage is him shooting right there in the rebel hands, and it's really fascinating. And as you said, I think the story tries to start out telling a story and sort of shifts to another story once he's thrown into this temporary exile that he's in. But it's just a really unique film that sort of blends, as you said, the rebel aspect, the person. It really does get into Matthew, who sort of, he says, I'm trying to find myself and see the man that I can become. And Marshall does a really good job of sort of telling his story of how he got to where he is. And then it's almost like Matthew telling his own story through his footage of, where he is now and sort of the progression of how he got to where he is.
And he also, we should mention, he also has OCD. And if he sort of throws himself into this uncontrolled world of this motorcycle traveling across unregulated territory, I mean, Afghanistan and so on and so forth. I mean, tell me a little bit about that. I mean, it's really odd.
It is odd, and it's one of those stories that, you hear of people who go on the adventures, people who, this is quite an advanced adventure. I don't think many of us would sort of do a motorcycle ride similar to him, but you're just going like, why? What is his motivations? And the fact that he does have OCD, which is, he's very controlled in his environment. And it's odd because I have known, Matthew through the filmmaking community and never really realized that side of him until the movie sort of brought it out. But you're just sort of thinking that, how is he interacting with all of these situations, because they're really not controllable, and they're just, it's that truth is stranger than fiction. It's really, if you sort of read this story, you'd go, wow, that's a crazy movie, and the fact that it's true is just even crazier. He's just he's so good at telling his story through his film, and Marshall at telling the story beyond the film, that it's really such a unique, I call it quietly powerful. And you talked about the sort of the quietness of the early on sort of setting the stage, and you do see him motorcycling, and it's this sort of beautiful quiet, and then all of a sudden it's like pow, quiet no more.
Well, we're going to turn to one of the clips. We should mention that he was actually captured by the Libyan government, we assume, anyway, imprisoned. In about March of 2011, he was fighting with the rebels, ambush. Spent, I guess, about 85 days, I think, in prison. And I want to turn to a clip of him while he is in prison. And we want to introduce this by saying that he's been there for a while, and what he can hear is a television set, which he describes that the guards are listening to. And let's go to that clip.
The guards watched a television at the end of the hall. And Gaddafi was holding a press conference. I started hearing talk of a prisoner being traded. And it was me that was being traded.
Efforts by the international community
And then I heard Hillary
to
Clinton
make clear to Colonel Gaddafi
talking about trading for me.
The American government is negotiating a deal to free Matthew Van Dyke.
I was on TV all over the world. Day after day, every single day, all the news was about me. People started bringing their children up to the prison walls to yell taunts at me. People were singing songs about me. And I heard this all day.
Matthew Van Dyke. We're fighting for your freedom. Freedom. You, Matthew Van Dyke.
But I now realize none of it was real. I felt like I had completely disappeared. So it was a way that my mind said, no, you do still exist, and you matter, and people are looking for you, as opposed to the reality that I felt before this started, which was people think you're dead.
So, Joe, what was your reaction when you come to the end of this thing and realize that none of this was real?
Yeah, it's so powerful because throughout that segment, you're sort of thinking, wow, this is one thing, and it turns out to be the other thing, and they're both equally powerful. And the fact that he's sort of, I think we've all sort of felt isolation, but the isolation to this point and sort of where your mind would go and where his mind went to sort of deal with it, that yes, I am relevant. I may not be relevant in the way that I thought I was, but I am relevant. It was very powerful. And there are little powerful moments throughout the whole film. It's unique. And I say sometimes documentaries are, subject over style, and this actually is both. It's a great, wonderful subject, but it's also so well told that you just really get engrossed in sort of every moment of it. And it's fascinating to think. I tend to sometimes think, wow, what would I do in that situation? Would I do the same thing? And I think many people do that. But the way he deals with all these situations, and he really did deal with them, was just amazing to me. It's a remarkable film and a remarkable person. And the joy of a film festival, sometimes we get to hear the people tell their own stories. And Matthew's going to be here on both Saturday and Sunday to not only talk about the film, but again, his experiences. So we're just, we're overjoyed with the film. It's a really remarkable.
I want to turn to one more piece of it because he does get out of prison and he does fight with the rebels. And you were talking about how he went out to find himself, to what is it to be a man. And at this point, he's fighting with the rebels. They've entered a city, and so far he's been sort of shooting at the Libyan government officials and soldiers from afar.
Right. And
this is where he talks about how he's been asked to actually become a sniper, as it were, to shoot another man.
One of the commanders in my brigade spotted an enemy in a window. They wanted me to shoot the guy. How many guys? Up until that point in the war, we had been fighting at ranges that I could not see the face of the enemy. It was, maybe muzzle flashes from the enemy firing at us, or, the enemies in that building or in that direction, fire at them. This was my first experience. I've never shot at a person before. My commander was yelling for me to hurry up and shoot the guy before he got out of the window.
He's here. You can't see because he's between this houses.
One of the rebels, I handed him my camera, and I said, film this. Is it on record? I wasn't sure, I couldn't be sure if I had hit him. And then one of the other guys saw the guy kind of pop up and look around and then leave the window. All of a sudden, I felt very conflicted.
What do you think he learned from this? I mean, at least against the sense from the film.
Yeah, it's that, but we sort of hypothesize what we do in certain situations, and it's always just that. It's a hypothesis. I would do this or I would do that. And I always say, I'm not sure. I think I would do this or I think I would do that because I really don't know. And sort of, I think this really put him in that situation where I did what I had to do. I did what I thought was right. And I sort of, I acted and I reacted. Again, I can't imagine being put in that situation to begin with, and let alone not really having the time to make a decision. This is going to be something that's going to stay with me. It just sort of happened. I love the fact that he gives his camera to somebody, which is something that a filmmaker doesn't always do. But he had the forethought. Again, he knew that something was happening, and I wanted to get a picture. And it's all that, as he said, it brought these faceless people and these people who weren't really people. They were sort of, as he said, objects, and from a distance. It put a face to the situation, and that again is just such a powerful. I can't imagine having to react and act and deal with that, and shooting people who, yes, are people who are quote unquote bad, but again, shooting somebody, and again, it's just a powerful segment that really shows what people do, driven to the extremes and the situations they're put into.
I wanted to turn to another film, Little Accidents, which is basically about a small American town living in the shadow of a terrible coal mine accident. Tell me a little bit about the film, the filmmaker, and the kind of technique that he was using here.
Yeah, this is actually Sarah Coangelo, which we love to do films that are directed by, again, underserved populations, and unfortunately there's just not very many women making film in any capacity. So to have a film in the festival that sort of speaks to that minority, we're very excited about. And I always call it a beautiful film, which people always think, about a mining accident in a small coal town in Appalachia. But it fits. It's just this really elegant sort of unlayer, there's layer upon layer, and it sort of just unfolds as you watch, and the colors are sort of saturated, and it really is beautiful. And the actors it's just a really unique film because it tells a story of sort of a community, but it does it by the individuals who make up the community. It was a Sundance hit, and it is powerful. I always sort of warn people, whether it's right or not to warn people, but it's, it is heavy. The subject matter is heavy, yet again, it's just a really beautiful way to see people who, again, are put into situations that we hopefully never are put into, and most of us will never realize. But, the characters are so rich, but the community itself plays a character, not only physically, but sort of emotionally, and it's just really beautiful to watch. Should mention, so there are really two stories that are going simultaneously, right? You've got Amos Jenkins, right, the lone survivor of this mining accident, and he's being pressured certainly to find out, say, well, what happened? But then you also have this second layer, which is you have a fellow by the name of Owen, and then his brother who has Down syndrome, and he runs into, I guess it's a son of one of the mining executives, and accidentally kills him. So that you have really almost these two events that take place simultaneously. By the way, how did you see her treating these two storylines, which seem to sort of interweave? Yeah, they gently interweave, and that's what I liked about it. I think it's saying it's sort of about the haves and the have-nots, yet they tend to coexist in this community, but do they really interact? And sort of slowly through developing the plot of the two stories, they do. They interact, and they have a definite interaction, and they sort of maintain their identity, yet fabricate a new identity so that they can fit into their environment that they're thrown into. And the youngsters in this film are phenomenal. It's not only the adult actors, and I love to watch sort of rising stars or people who really just get the most out of their characters, and this is certainly one of them. The kid is just phenomenal. Just want to go to a couple of clips. First, this is Jenkins, who attends or comes near a meeting being apparently held by a lawyer, talking to some of the miners to try to get some sense about what happened, and perhaps the potential obviously is for a lawsuit over this. Let's go to that clip first.
Going in?
Oh no, I just swung by.
Why are you working there?
So I like to work, Carl. That coal was all I know.
Makes you look like there's something wrong with you. You want those people to think you're on their side? This thing is big. Don't you get that?
You like watching from the sidelines? I wonder what Junior and the rest of them would be saying if they could see you now.
And of course, Junior, by the way, is someone who was killed in the mining accident and had actually been complaining about safety issues. And the interesting thing about Jenkins is not only does he obviously getting this pressure from some of the miners who were attending this meeting, but he's also getting pressure from the mining company not to say anything.
Yeah, he's definitely the man in the middle, and he's, everybody wants something from him, and he basically wants to sort of be left alone. He's willing to tell his story, but he doesn't want to influence the story. He wants the story to be what the story is. And obviously the people on the one end, the mining executives, are trying to say it's not our fault, and the miners are all saying, well, it's definitely their fault. And he's trapped, and that plays a big role in the movie, and again goes back to how he interacts with these different various communities. He sort of is forced to interact with people that he may not otherwise interact with. So it's really a phenomenal story of society and the individual and how they interact.
And of course, and then we see sort of a similar story with Owen, who has accidentally killed JT, the son of one of the mining executives, and he's talking to his older brother, and he himself is pressuring his brother with Down syndrome, is pressuring him not to say anything. He sort of has his own secret. Let's hear a little of that.
What happened in the woods? That was an accident.
Yeah, accident.
Like Dad, remember?
Yep, he didn't come home.
That's right. It happened by mistake.
My mom said she cried.
Yeah, you don't want her to cry again, right? You understand? Better keep your mouth shut.
What's that boy?
Forget about that boy. You promise to be quiet?
Yes.
I don't give these to you anymore if you don't. You understand?
Yes.
Good.
And even in that instance, you can almost see Owen doing the same thing the mining company is doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it, certainly as you hear that clip, that's exactly what you're thinking. And the whole point of that little story to me is that there's no malice in what was done between Owen and the boy and in talking to his brother. And it's sort of... It's sort of innocent that he is sort of talking about what happened in the woods and how that corresponds to what happened to the mine. And he's a very bright kid who just hasn't been given necessarily the opportunity. And again, I think that goes back to the have and the have-nots. But he's still this pure kid who had something bad happen to him. So I think when he's sort of strong-arming his brother, he isn't doing it to, certainly he doesn't want anyone to know, but he isn't doing it to be a bad guy. He's just, something happened that I was not in control of, and now we need to deal with it. So it's interesting to sort of see the arc of the individual characters as well as the whole story. And they're sort of, as you said, mini stories and layers and layers, and to me that's one of the joys of the film.
I want to turn to something maybe a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
Which is Kumiko, the treasure hunter. Tell us a little bit about the filmmaker and why you decided to choose this particular film, which was disturbingly quiet in many ways. Go ahead. And when people see the film, they'll know exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, this is the Zellner brothers, and the Zellner brothers have sort of been just gurgling underwater for doing these really quirky independent films that not a lot of people saw, but those who saw it thought they're really sort of quite brilliant and genius in what they do. And one will direct and the other will produce, and sort of they sort of have their own filmmaking community behind them. But so I've always been appreciative of their work, and this is sort of something that is much bigger than what they've done in the past. And for me, it was a slam dunk for many reasons. One, it's, as you said, comedic. It's quirky without being totally outlandish. I think some people hear quirky and think, oh my God, here's another crazy, I won't be able to follow it, it makes no sense, and what's the point of it? And it's really not that kind of quirky. It's quirky in the sense of its delivery and the storyline and the subject matter. And it's based on a movie that many people are familiar with, Fargo. And I love to sort of incorporate and see how, people who are fans of the film Fargo and maybe the TV show appreciate the movie, and those who may not have seen Fargo and appreciate the movie. And it's really delightful, and I'm glad we're again looking at something a little sort of comedic. We went through a couple heavy things, and the festival is not all heavy topics. This is a good proof of some lightness.
What I say was, so Kumiko, and then talking about Fargo, she has this copy of it, and she decides that there is a scene in the film where one of the main characters is burying some, I think it's about $100,000 or so, in the snow, right? And next to this fence. And she comes to believe that she's figured out where this is. And she eventually leaves Tokyo and comes to the United States. And she's trying to make her way to Minnesota. And I'm going to play this first clip, which is there's a sheriff's deputy, Caldwell, who tries to help her out. And in this first clip, he is having difficulty trying to communicate with her, and you get this clash, or maybe between what's real and what isn't real in terms of culture itself. Let's roll with that.
I'm here with this Japanese woman who doesn't speak English particularly well, and so I was wondering if you could possibly translate a few things for us.
I'm Chinese. I don't know any Japanese.
Not a. But don't you know just at least a couple sentences?
Only Mandarin. That is it. Very different.
Kumiko?
What?
Do you speak any Chinese?
No, Japanese.
So here we see this sort of, she's sort of moving through this American culture, and she meets actually a woman earlier who has the same kind of sort of strange interaction, which you're not really sure what she's thinking as this American sort of goes on and on and on. What do you think about that? The sort of culture clash, I guess, is maybe.
The whole thing is the fish out of water story. Here's this woman who lived one life in Tokyo, and not only is she coming to the States, but she's coming to North Dakota, Minnesota, where the pace of life is a little different than it is even in some bigger cosmopolitan areas. So it's a whole culture clash, and in various interaction she has sort of reinforces that fact that we're a very different way of life than other parts, and especially in Japan. And it's that deadpan humor you even sort of hear in the delivery of Caldwell, where he's not realizing that there's a huge divide between Chinese and Japanese, and then even between Chinese. So, and those little pockets of humor throughout the film that really sort of show that we're not in Kansas anymore.
Right. It's been observed that the film basically celebrates escapist power of personal fantasies and bears witness to their dangerous extremes. And we'll go to this next clip, which again is Caldwell. He's talking to Kumiko, and he's trying to figure out what it is that she's looking for, and obviously comes the realization that it comes out of this film.
You're looking for the money that was in this? That's what you're looking for?
I discovered treasure.
Yeah.
Right here.
Well...
It's mine.
Okay, well, you see, this is not real. It's just pretend, like like entertainment. It's not real, like documentary or news or reality show or something. It's just it's just a normal movie. Fake, like a story.
No, fake.
Yeah, fake.
No, fake. It's...
And I know, I understand,
Yeah.
but a documentary is real, and a normal movie is fake.
not fake. Real.
And this is a normal movie.
I discovered treasure. Right here.
Look, I want to help you. I'm just trying to figure out how.
So what do you make of that scene? I mean, that's really sort of the crux of the film itself.
Yeah, it's not like she came from across the street to discover this treasure that in her mind exists that doesn't really exist. She came from a faraway land with a very different way of life. And the first part of the film does a really good job of sort of you discover her and about her life. She has a solitary existence, her cat, and she sort of works for a boss, and it's sort of not a situation that she really feels like she gets anything from. So you really learn a lot about her, that she's willing to make this effort to change her life. And then that scene in particular, you're going, does she really not get the whole concept, or is she just, what is it about that conversation that, why does she think it's a documentary? Because you never really realize, other than I'm going to get rich and change my life, you don't really know what her thought process is, which is kind of interesting, because various other clips throughout the storyline, again, leading you to this point, after it makes a transformation from being about her and sort of her existence to finding the treasure and then this fish out of water story when she eventually comes to the States. So it's really just trying to get in her mind and thinking, and then you go, how is this going to end? And it's amazing the way it ends. And again, it's a very beautiful film, and I hate to use that word, but it's shot beautifully, and it's just very, very unique. And it's the windswept, barren, lots of snow really plays, again, a role in the film.
So how would you sum up this year's entries and selections?
Yeah, we're great. We're very excited. Every year sort of brings some hidden gems. We have 5 films that have been nominated for Academy Awards from their own countries. Every country submits for the best foreign film. We're highlighting Mexico this year. We try and highlight a film industry that's sort of unique and shows a variety of films, comedies, dramas, and really unique takes on subjects. So that's why we chose Mexico. Seminars are great. Also the tent. I think people don't realize we pitched this big tent called The Big Tent. That's not only houses our box office, but our hospitality area. We have a food vendor. It's a place to come together and sort of meet. And then we do special events. We'll have Mexican folk dancing, a tequila tasting, and Dogfish Head beer tasting. So it really is, we say we put the fest in festival. It's not just about film. It's really about reaching out to the community in various ways and bringing them together to see film, but again, to just sort of be a community-focused event.
And the dates again?
November 5th through the 9th. You can always go to www.rehobothfilm.com. Give us a call. We'd love to help you.
We've been speaking with Joe Belancio. He is the man at the Rehoboth Independent Film Festival who chooses the films, and we appreciate you stopping by and talking about them.
Thank you again for having us.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush, and thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.